Yeah, so it's my great pleasure to formally introduce John to the club. I know many of us, I think all of us probably know John quite well, but he's been a great friend of our club and our community. As you know, he's been a professor at Marlborough College. He is a very accomplished artist. And his work is displayed permanently at the Boston Museum of Fine Arts, Tokyo, Paris. He founded Insight Photography locally and has led a lot of student trips to the Pine Ridge Reservation, which I've been very important to our community. And he helped connect our club to Pine Ridge, as you all know, and facilitated so much of our work there. And when the Brattleboro Area Interfaith Youth Group, led by Lisa Sparrow, decided they wanted to visit Pine Ridge last year, before the annual trip to the Cheyenne River Reservation, John volunteered to meet us there and show us all around. And he did, and we had just a stunningly amazing time learning from John and seeing so many important things on the Pine Ridge Reservation. Including the place where the makerspace is that we've been supporting. So that's just a brief history of some of our interactions with John, but he also was able to show us the Standing Rock Reservation at the end of our trip last year. And a lot of the photos from John's book that he's gonna be talking about today are from that. So I'm really looking forward to seeing the photos and hearing from John about his experience there. So with that, John.
Can you folks hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Thank you all very much. Thanks, Mara, for honoring Pauline too. And I'm gonna share the screen, so hopefully this will all work fine. My screen sharing has been disabled, Marty. Is Marty still there? Quit hiding. Hey, Marty. Marty.
He's working on it.
Okay.
No.
I don't know why it's not working. But maybe, can you see my screen now? Okay, so I'm gonna talk to you for a little bit about the Dakota Access Pipeline Resistance Movement, and that happened in 2016. And I tend to talk fast, so I'm not sure you can holler at me if you can't hear me or understand me, but this is a presentation I'm just gonna do about this one book project. And normally I would talk for 60 to 90 minutes on it, so it's going to be really abbreviated, and that's part of why I'm going to talk fast, because basically I just want to give you enough information to understand the basics, and then you can decide whether to look further into the book and other films and other books about it. But I really want to thank you for the opportunity to present the work. I put a lot of time into making work, and this is a collaboration with over 50 people, mostly Lakota, mostly Indigenous people, where there's music and poetry and writing and stories and Lakota artwork. I'm going to show you mostly my photographs. I want to also acknowledge that we are all on Indigenous land. The land that you're sitting on was land that was stolen from Indigenous people. They were pushed off and pushed out west, and they've been fighting these challenges ever since the arrival of Europeans in America. And not to badmouth Europeans, but I think we all owe them an understanding of how much they are fighting to hold on to some semblance of their culture and their lives. One example of how much they are still doing it is just a little over a week ago, the Trump administration decided to remove the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe in Massachusetts and Rhode Island, remove their status as a tribe, which that has devastating impact for them, as it means that the government can stop honoring the treaty rights. And they are the first tribe that met with Indigenous people. They're the ones who, had Thanksgiving with Columbus's, not Columbus, but with the Pilgrims and all. So they're not the ones who first met Columbus, sorry about that. So anyway, and I want to acknowledge that. So let me just take a breath for a second. I want to acknowledge that the work that I've done with Rotary has continued over the years. I really appreciate what Rotary clubs at Brattleboro have done, and now Rotary, with Marty and Tristan's help, have hooked in South Dakota and other Rotary clubs to help Lakota people, and it's been really amazing. We've done a lot of projects together, which we could talk about another time, from helping the radio station to helping the BEAR project, which is the Better Education and Reading Project on Pine Ridge. Now working on the makerspace for artists in White Clay, Nebraska, which is an amazing opportunity. So I really appreciate what Rotary is doing, and Marty and Tristan in particular, but all of you. So in 2016, I heard about what was going on in North Dakota by the Standing Rock Sioux Reservation, which is another Lakota reservation, just 65 miles south of Bismarck. There was the Dakota Access Pipeline was being put in, and it was going to travel 1,170 miles of oil piping from the tar sands in North Dakota and in Canada down to the Missouri, and go down to where it could be processed and sold to other countries. And this was originally supposed to go to Bismarck, but the people there didn't want it, so they rerouted it and sent it down south, and it was 65 miles south, and it was right a mile north of the Standing Rock Sioux Reservation. This is the entranceway to the Ocheti Shakowee camp, which is the 7 Council Fires camp, and it was a resistance camp. They did not want to be talked about as protesters. They wanted it to be a sacred mission of prayer where they were protecting the water, the sacred water of life, because all life needs water. And on your way down from Bismarck, you would get stopped by National Guard and state police who would check your car out and tell you that there was a protest down there, maybe you should take another route and everything. And I was traveling down in September. This had started in April. I was traveling down in September with some students, college students, and we were just going to visit friends there, and we had raised in 2.5 days in Brattleboro, we had raised about $3,000 in cash and a van full of camping gear to bring with us. Like I said, the National Guard had told us that we should watch out, maybe we should go another way, but they asked us if we knew really what was going on. We said, yeah, we were going there to visit people, and they said, okay, they wouldn't stop us. When we got to the camp, and we went into their entrance, there was all these veterans, Indigenous people who were their security team, who stopped the car. And what they did was they told us that we were welcome. Everybody was welcome. Anybody and everybody was welcome in the camps, but there were certain rules you had to live by. There was no guns, no alcohol, no violence. You had to honor other people and respect people. And if you wanted to take photographs, film, interview, or anything like that, you needed to get permission. And there was a protocol how to do it. And if you were interested, then you had to go to a tent and get trained on the protocol. If you wanted to go on daily actions against the police and the oil company, then you had to get nonviolent action training first. And they requested that no money be spent in the camp for anything for individuals, and that there could be donations. And they asked you to give more to the camp than you took away. So, this last picture here, this is, there was always donations coming in every day, clothes, camping gear, utilities, all kinds of stuff. And it was free to anybody, including anybody off the camp. So people would come from the reservation, from the area, the region, farmers and people would come and get donations. This is outside the medic area. There was free chiropractic work, first responders, there's babies born, midwives, there was herbalists, chiropractors, and it was all free. This is people just drinking tea. There was always hot tea there to have if you wanted to warm up.
John, can I interrupt you with a question? Sure. I'm not sure if everybody else can see these photos that you're talking about, but what I'm seeing right now is sort of a thumbnails of all the photos.
Oh, you're kidding.
Is that what other people are seeing, or am I just...
That's really strange because I just showed it to another group by Zoom and they could all see them.
That's what I'm seeing.
That's what I see too.
Thumbnails. That's all I'm seeing.
Possibly be. I did the exact same presentation just a week ago to Bryant University, and they saw them all perfectly.
I can see your mouse moving
Yeah.
over the thumbnails.
But you're only seeing, you're not, right now, you're not seeing a larger picture.
No,
No.
just, I can see which photo your mouse is on.
I have no idea how I'm going to do this then. Because I'm sharing my screen, and on my screen, all I see is that one picture, large.
Do you have two
Oh
screens
wait,
going?
it says sharing is paused.
John, do you have multiple screens?
Let me get out of it and see. I'm glad you stopped me, but stop share.
There we
There it
go.
is. There it is. Now it's big.
Yay.
Yeah.
All right, I'm sorry about that. Really sorry, but I'm glad you stopped me. So this is inside the Chiropractic Yurt, and every day there was nonviolent action training. If you wanted to go on an action outside of the camp where you would go to protest or raise awareness in the public, go to where the pipeline was being buried, or go to outside of the banks or the jails or anywhere that was involved in any way, shape, or form, they would want you to have this training first. There was security that would go with you to make sure you were doing things in a nonviolent way. Otherwise, they would circle around you and take you away peacefully, but they would not let people, they didn't even want people cursing in the police or anything like that. There was an art camp where every day you could go and you could make artwork that was banners and so forth to help with raising awareness. People came from all over the world. I met people there from Japan, Finland, Australia, New Zealand, South America, Central America, just everywhere. And there was over 300 tribes of Native Americans who were there, Indigenous people from the United States. This is a woman, an elder from Pine Ridge Reservation, who left her home, left her job, left her family, and she and her dog came and lived in this car for many months. It was ceremony to the people who were there. And when it was ceremony, they considered it a prayerful ceremony, not a protest. It was a prayerful resistance ceremony. They dressed and acted like it was ceremony. So these are two Indigenous women who were dressed up in their finest regalia for ceremony. So this is the beadwork on the moccasins. The bag is hand beaded. That's a portrait of her grandparents. This is
John,
yeah.
before you go any further, just if people don't know, if you put view options, you can blow these slides quite a bit higher than the rest, than what it's coming through from you. So you can go to 200 to 300%, and it makes a big difference in the size of the slides. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So this is Mary Lyons. She's a great grandmother from the Ojibwe Nation, and this is her doing every day. She led a morning women's prayer march where they would march from the Sacred Fire Circle down to the river, the confluence of the Cannonball and the Missouri rivers, where they were going to bury the pipeline. And it was just for women, but hundreds of men would come in support. This is a women's-led, Indigenous women leading a daily march that went out to where the pipeline was being laid underneath a farm. And what would happen was a couple hundred people would walk up the road to where the pipeline workers were, and just singing and chanting and drumming, and they would come up with all these signs. And when the pipeline workers saw them coming, they would get scared and they would leave for the day and they would stop work. So the thing was, they would do these actions on a daily basis in different places to attempt to try and slow down the building of the pipeline, so that the lawyers and legal defense and tribal leaders from the different tribes could go and fight in the courts and in the government in both Bismarck and North Dakota and in Washington, D.C. And that's what they were doing. And so this was one day when these Indigenous young women led a march. They went up, and the police came in riot gear and tried to force everybody to stop and leave. And they said that they would only stop and leave if the police agreed to have a circle and have a prayer and talk about water. And the prayer would take about 10, 15 minutes, and then they would leave. And the police were threatening for probably 45 minutes before they finally agreed. The leader of the police realized that the women were serious. They weren't going to leave until they did that. So rather than get into any kind of struggle with all of these natives and their allies. He finally agreed, and they got in a circle. The police, about 15 police, and the leaders of the march got in a circle, had a prayer ceremony, talked about the importance of water, and then this is everybody turned around and walking back to the camp. This is outside of a court in Mandan, North Dakota, and this young woman is pleading with this police officer to think about his family, his children, his grandchildren, their grandchildren, and all future generations, and how important it is to have clean water, and that the pipeline will leak. Sooner or later, it will leak. This is another group going up the road from one camp to another. There was a number of different camps. And you can see that it's led by horses, because it was nonviolent and weapons weren't allowed, but they would use horsemen, the indigenous horsemen, to lead the group between the police and the water protectors, because the police were using weapons, and they would put the horses in between to protect. This is outside of a courthouse in Bismarck, a federal courthouse, where there was water protectors who'd been arrested, and the government was not telling the leaders of the camp or the legal aid what they were arrested and being charged with, and where they were being sent, because they were sending them to jails all over the place. So during rush hour, a few hundred people went up and blocked the four-way traffic in Bismarck, and they asked for non-native volunteers to volunteer to be arrested that day. And the reasoning was that if a non-native was arrested, then they could get out of jail that day or within a couple days easily. If a native person was arrested, it was very common for them not to be able to get out of jail for months or sometimes years. This is an action that was just on the side of a road to raise awareness to the local community. And this is on November 20th. There was this bridge, the Backwater Bridge on Route 1806, just north of the reservation, just outside of the Ocheti Shakui camp. And it had been blocked by police for 3 weeks. The tribal elders had kept asking for them to open it up, because that was the main source of getting to and from Bismarck, from the reservation and all areas south of it. And they needed to open it up for ambulances and for the people who didn't have a lot of money to be able to get to a decent grocery store and things like that. Because when the road was closed, it was an hour-and-a-half extra round trip. So the police kept saying they were going to do it, and they didn't do it. So finally, at one point, a native truck driver went on there and just started using his semi to open up the bridge, and the police started firing in his truck with live rounds. And then hundreds of people came out of the camp, and there was a 10-hour armed, what they called a battle, but it was on this one side of the razor wire was about 135 police in riot gear. On the other side was water protectors, about 300 of them, standing and singing and chanting. And the police used water cannons for 10 hours, and it was below freezing out that night. They used rubber bullets, concussion grenades, beanbag bullets, tear gas, sound cannons. This is people running from tear gas. This is tear gas being shot. Somebody being helped by a medic who had got tear gas. So the next day, the medics called a press conference, and they said that there had been 180 people who needed medical attention from that evening, the 10-hour armed struggle, and not a single one of them was police. The 180 were all from the water protector side, and it was most people, it was hypothermia. There were some people who had cardiac arrest. One young Native woman had her eye shot out with a rubber bullet, and one young white ally woman lost her action of her arm because it was blown up with a concussion grenade. This is an action on Thanksgiving. So I'm really speeding along, but the book of this has 250 pages. And at Thanksgiving time, Wesley Clark, the veteran, was so upset by what had happened on November 20th when he learned about it. He put a call out to veterans all over the country to come stand and support the indigenous people who were being, basically they felt they were being over-militarized, harassment from the US government and the authorities. So 3,000 to 5,000, somewhere in there, of veterans came, and the first blizzard came, and they came to stand between the indigenous people and their allies and the police. And this is the first action they did. And when they did this, it was 35 below zero in a blizzard. They went out to stand between the police and the water protectors, and they were successful. Obama heard about what was happening. He was still in office, and he told the Army Corps of Engineers to put a cease and desist order with the oil company and have the and the state, and to have them do the full environmental impact study on the pipeline, which is what the Native people had been asking for all the time. There's 470,000 barrels of oil that go through this pipeline every day. The day that Trump got into office, he reversed that order, told the Army Corps of Engineers to cancel Obama's order and just finish the pipeline, start sending oil through, and it's been going through ever since. In the book, there's also Indigenous ledger art. This is by Dwayne Wilcox. It's called Fake News. They say if you take a picture, it lasts longer. It's photographing an iceberg. This is called 500 Years of Making America Great Again, by Dwayne Wilcox also. This is also by him. It's Department of Indigenous Studies. And this is his, and it's specifically in relationship to the pipeline resistance, because there was a day in October where the security guards were clubbing and had guard dogs attacking elder women and non-violent water protectors. So this is called, after a long day of clubbing, dog tired, and it's Miller time. You can see he's got a lot of cultural humor. This is by Gilbert Kills Pretty Enemy III, and it's called Morton County Sheriff's Last Stand. He was the one who led the movement. And this is taken after a very famous painting of Custer's Last Stand. And this is by Joe Pulliam, Lakota artist, who's, Joe is one of the ones from the Pine Ridge Reservation who's most actively, a local artist, actively helping the makerspace get off the ground. He's really a great person, but this is called Standing in Prayer. And you can see he's wearing his traditional regalia. He's holding his prayer pipe. It's chinupa, which white people usually call a peace pipe, and everything's the same except for he's wearing a gas mask. And this is the last one I have of them. It's also by Joe Pulliam, and it's called Rubber Bullet Martyr, and it's after the woman who lost her eye, being crucified, and the water and all. So I feel like I'm rushing like crazy, but so I just want to, you can cut me off, Marty, if you should, but I just want to acknowledge that at least when I was in the camp, to me, it really was something. I was there for a total of 8 weeks over 6 trips from September through March. And I never saw anybody in the camp being violent against the police or anybody else. I saw a lot of abuse by police and oil company workers against the people who were there protesting, water protectors. But I used to go out and I would talk to farmers and locals, who weren't part of it, to just see their perspective and share with them. And being a, older white guy, I had no problem doing that. I would just go to diners in the morning or laundromats or whatever, and I could talk to people. And a common thing I would get from them was that they thought that everybody in the camp was getting paid. That's what they'd been hearing. They thought people who went there, some of the more conservative people thought those who went there were being hypocrites because we all drove cars, took airplanes, heated our houses with oil and everything, and we were being hypocritical by being there when we use oil too. And I just want to acknowledge that that it's not that the native people believe that you should not use oil and nobody should use oil. What they're asking for is they're asking to change values and to pay attention to the fact that we all need to be caring and prioritizing caring for the earth for all generations, for the future. They believe in that and in their virtues. They have 7 virtues, and they really believe that it's important to respect the earth and all living things, and to try and think not only for yourself, but to be generous towards others and generous towards future generations. So in 1980, there was a court case. It comes all the way back from the 19th century when the Black Hills were stolen from them. And rather than taking them back, and they were stolen from them, they were supposed to be theirs for the and forever and ever, as long as the sun shone, because of treaty rights. And when it was stolen from them, it was because of gold and minerals being found in the Black Hills. And rather than starting the Indian Wars again, which is what people, the military, thought was going to happen, they took it to court. And they fought in the court system all the way up until 1980, when they got, they were awarded a decision by the Supreme Court saying that, yes, it's true. They had been, the Black Hills had been robbed of them, and they had, where the Supreme Court said that it was too long that they had been in the, the government and white businesses and non-native families' property now, that they couldn't give the land back even though it was stolen. But they awarded them $108 million. And the Pine Ridge and Standing Rock reservations are the two poorest places in the United States, and have been for over the last 60 years. And people often don't have water or electricity. Sometimes people freeze to death, starve to death. It's really, really extremely poor. They have never spent $1 of that money. They have refused to, because on principle, they believe that land was stolen from them, and it's the most sacred place on the earth to them, and they need it for their future generations. That money is, the Supreme Court has kept it in escrow, and it's now worth over $1.3 billion, and they're still refusing to spend a dollar. So with that, I just want to say I'm happy to talk with anybody about more of it at any point you want. And if I can figure out how to get out of the screen, I'll stop sharing and see if there's time, if anybody wants to ask any questions. Sorry, I'm talking so fast. I'm really sorry about the images not showing in the beginning. But thanks for helping me resolve it. Anybody want to ask anything?
Thank you, John. Please, if you do have questions, type something up in the chat box, or just your name in the chat box, and I'll call on you. We do have about 10 minutes, so I'm sure John will be happy.
Well, that's happening. There is, they do have the books at Vermont Center for Photography, and everyone's books. It is a collaboration, and all of the money, all the royalties I would get goes to the tribes for environmental issues. But on my website, there's a free CD that's free downloadable, jwillis.net, where there's music by all different people who were part of the movement. So I hope you'll
Anna, thank you, John. And we'll make sure Marty includes a website in the newsletter. Anna.
I'm just curious about that settlement money, and whose call is it? Is there like a council of elders that makes that decision, and do you see them having discussions about whether they could use that money to help this incredibly poor community and bring in water and electricity, all these other things, the infrastructure that they need?
They have, I should say that now they have much more infrastructure than when I started going there 29 years ago. And the families that I stay with regularly, where I met Pauline in one of their houses, when we first went, they didn't have running water. They still don't have running water in the house. They have a pump outside that's an electric, but they have running water that way. But they have electricity now. They have a better water system and electricity and stuff than they used to. But I've heard many conversations in tribal council meetings and around in schools and religious ceremonies and all kinds of ceremonies about that money. And to them, it's just, that money is like poison. They don't believe they should have to use that, because if they take $1 of it, it acknowledges that they are giving up the Black Hills, and they believe that they need the Black Hills, and the Black Hills should be given back to them. And that's what they work very hard to, in the courts and other ways, trying to get people to give back the Black Hills. And there has been a movement where individual families and businesses sometimes will give back a few acres of land. And that's their hope, is that people will gradually just give it back.
Could the money be used to purchase any part of that land?
Yeah, if people were willing to sell it. Yeah. But the value system, we could spend hours and hours talking about the value system, but the value system is so different. I mean, when I grew up, the family on the house that had the biggest, fanciest house and the nicest cars and went on the biggest vacations, we all talked about and thought about as if they were the most successful family. And Indigenous communities, when I'm around them and they're really talking freely, if there's a family like that nearby, they don't talk about them as being successful. They look at each other and they say, why are they so greedy? They believe that they should all be sharing. I gave the first trip I was there for a month, I gave an elder something whose house I was in. I gave him a very special gift because I wanted to honor what he had done, giving me, teaching me for a month and giving me a place and everything. At the end of the month, I gave him this gift and he loved it. A year later, he had invited me back. I came back and I'm looking around his house for this gift. And I didn't see it anywhere. So I thought, oh, maybe he didn't really like it, you know, because his house was very small, not very much to it. There was nowhere to hide it. And then one day I heard him bragging to somebody about this gift. And I said, oh, Eugene, you really like that. I thought you didn't like it because I didn't see it anymore. He looked at me with this, you know, quizzical look and he said, I liked it so much I gave it away. And I would never do that in my family. Somebody gave us a really special gift. You keep that gift forever and you put it in a place of honor and everything. And you tell people about it maybe, but you keep it because it's special. And I said to him, what do you mean you gave it away? He said, it was such an amazing thing to be given that gift. I wanted others to have that experience. So to him, it was more important to share it than it was to keep it. And I could go on with lots and lots of examples of that kind of mentality. Their value system is so different. And for them to hold on to what their value system is within a dominant culture around them in all directions is really challenging. Because to us, yes, it seems like all that money's there. They're so poor. Why don't they spend that money? But they believe that that money is wrong. They believe that the idea of owning the most sacred land and their planet to them is wrong. And they believe, and they have it in writing. It's in writing that it's theirs forever and ever as long as the sun shines.
Thank you, John. I believe Phil has a question or a comment as well.
Hey, Phil.
John, thanks so much for the wonderful presentation and for your terrific work you've done over the years here. So is there any potential for further court action, or, you know, since it's been to the Supreme Court, is it done? Or is there any chance that the tribe could recover the property?
I honestly, I think it's a real long shot that they'll ever get the government to give them back the property. But I do think that, like I said before, there are smaller groups who are buying pieces of land. There are smaller groups, you know, people are donating money for them to buy land. There are people who are giving land back, but, you know, there'll be very small amounts, but that's important to them. And as far as the pipeline goes, the Trump administration is trying to remove every barrier they can to just do as much of the pipelines and oil as they possibly can. But recently, the federal courts have stopped the pipeline from increasing what it was going to do, because it was trying to double the amount of oil that would go through that pipeline. And they've stopped them from doing that and said they have to follow through with the environmental impact study. And they've also, I think, put a hold on the KXL pipeline, which is going to be even much bigger, that people had shut down and voted against when Obama was in office. And then Trump turned that one around when he came into office too. And so the tribes are, and instead of there being one big movement like there was at Camp Ocheti Shakwe, there's splinter groups all over Canada and the United States who are trying to slow down and stop these pipelines. And again, it's not that they understand and use oil too, but they're trying to get people to think more about how can we do it in a better way.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, John. We might have time for one more question. I don't see anything in the chat box. And so I will end here. Thank you so much, John. It's always a pleasure to have you part of our meetings and sharing, you know, your insights on Pine Ridge and the Lakota culture. Best of luck to you in Providence. We miss you here in Brattleboro.
Yeah. Well, that will always be our community, I'm sure.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, and thanks to those who interrupted me, Rob, and for Anna for helping realize there was 2 screens open.
Okay.
I'm not used to this Zoom stuff.